Hey guys, if you have been dealing with tight hips, weak glutes, or even pain with running or lifting, you actually might be skipping a crucial step when it comes to hip training. That's why today I want to introduce the hip hierarchy of training. And by the end of today's video, I want you guys to know how to structure your training weeks to meet your specific goals. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Dr. Sarah the Hip Doc. I'm a physical therapist and run coach, and I love helping runners with hip pain get back to running with confidence and comfort. First foundational layer of this pyramid that you're going to see is hip mobility, stability, and control. Let's break that down and then I'll go into some examples. Hip mobility, what I like to think of is how much available range of motion do you have in your hip and in the joints around it that are going to allow you to do the things that you want to do. A very classic example is runners not having enough hip extension, so that means their leg coming back behind them, and they don't have that ability to get a trailing limb. Maybe they're not able to use their glutes as well, and they're yanking more on their back. Now moving into stability. Stability is the ability to control the range of motion that we have. If we have a very mobile hip that moves a ton into rotation, we want to be able to have the stability to control that range of motion, so we're not getting like excess grinding and irritation at the joint, or having all of the muscles have to work super hard to try to get it in there and be nice and tight. The last one is hip control, or even like whole system control. I like to think of this one as, how is my hip interacting with my pelvis, interacting with my shoulders, interacting with my ankle when I'm going through different motions? Am I able to coordinate really good control with exercises like a single leg squat, a forward hop, a lateral hop, stuff that is pertinent and important to running? Let's go into some examples.
Here's an example of a mobility exercise I might use if someone is stiff or struggling to get into a squat without hip pain. The biggest thing for this exercise is test retest. So we want to go into the squat and then try it with the band and then try it without, and make sure that it always feels better after. Here's another mobility exercise I might use if someone has a pinchy hip. This might work to unlock the front of the hip, and it's just more gentle than being in a standing position. And here's an example of a stability exercise. This one's actually great for people like me who are super mobile. I have a very mobile, clinky, pinchy hip, and this allows me to control the excess mobility that I have throughout my right hip. And here's an example of a control exercise. The most important thing about this exercise is that it's putting all of the systems together. So if I'm a runner and I'm struggling with hip stability, I really want to focus on my shoulders stacked over my hips and my hips stacked over where both of my feet would be. And I'm coordinating all of the systems of my low back, my hip, my ankle, my knee to work together with really good form. That's the most important part about control.
One step up on the pyramid is hip endurance. What I like to think of endurance as is the ability to maintain that mobility, stability, and control that we gained for sustained bouts of time. Let me give you two examples here and I'll show you some exercises. So if you're a person that has a very stiff hip, sometimes I get people that have really stiff hips and they're maybe lacking that internal rotation. So it's really hard for them to get their hip to come in or their pelvis to come in on their hip. Maybe we'll do like a mobilization exercise, and then I'll actually have them follow it up with something like a forward hinge with rotation, where they're actually having to utilize that full range of motion over a sustained bout of time so it lasts longer. That's example number one. Example number two is maybe you're a person, like I said earlier, that's super mobile, and you are working on the stability of being able to do a single leg squat and not have your hip travel all over the place. You're just working on it traveling up and down nice and smooth. An endurance exercise might be like 3 sets of 20 of really focusing on your hip traveling nice and seamlessly over, or your pelvis traveling nice and seamlessly over that hip without a ton of wobble. Let me show you two examples.
Here's an example of a hip endurance exercise. You're going to see it's not vastly different from some of the last exercises that I showed. However, if I was struggling to get hip mobility into flexion, this is really going to force me to work into that deep lunge position. Or if I was working on my stability and my control, this is really going to force me to work on that with a little bit more resistance resistance over a sustained long bout of time. Or if I struggled with mobility or stability in this lateral direction, I could do an exercise like this to capitalize on the gains that I created.
And next up on the pyramid, we'll see strength. Now, strength is different than endurance because we're actually putting a different stimulus into the muscle. Instead of doing low load, high repetition, we might be doing higher intensity for shorter amounts of time. So we might be doing anywhere from 3 to 5 sets of anywhere from like 3 to 12 repetitions based on what we're going for strength-wise. The catch is we can only train our available strength in the available mobility, stability, and control that we have. That's why we need those lower levels of the pyramid to be fulfilled and satisfied before we're really getting true strength gains. Something that I'll see is people are like, Sarah, I'm just gonna strength train my hip pain away. And I'm like, maybe like that might work, but if you're going through different exercises and all you're doing is like jamming your hip into the top of the socket because you don't have a lot of mobility into flexion or bending that hip or into your squat position, you're never going to necessarily be comfortable with your squat until you work on your mobility, stability, and control. Let me show you some examples of strength moves that I like to use for myself and my clients.
And here are a couple strength exercises I love. The main difference is not that the moves are crazy different or really any different. It's just that I'm going to be using more weight and I'm going to be using lower repetitions. I do have a whole training on strength training and I'll link it in the comments below. But that's one of my favorite exercises. This is one of my favorite exercises to really work on that hip hinge and get a nice single leg loading with a little bit of support from the opposite side. I also love this last exercise because it trains in the lateral plane of motion. I love getting my strength training to train in all 3 planes of motion, so forwards, sideways, and rotational, to really make sure that I'm getting each component that I need to be very strong and resilient for running.
One fun benefit of doing strength work after you have a really good foundational pyramid is that it actually maintains the gains that you've created. So if I have a client and I'm working with them and we've been working really hard on their stability or their mobility, and we've been in the lower part of the pyramid, once I've been working with them for about 2 to maybe even 3 months, then we'll start to really transition into doing mostly strength work. And as we're doing strength work, they're working in their available mobility, stability, and control, which has been improved, and they're able to maintain the progress that they've made, and they're not having to do these silly little exercises forever. Lastly, at the very, very tippy top of the pyramid, we are seeing power. This is the ability to move weight or our body or just mass quickly over a short period of time within the available mobility, stability, and control demands. I love working on power with my athletes because it allows them to climb faster, to run faster, to go further, to feel more explosive. It does really great stuff for our tendons and our ligaments, increasing its tensile components and making us very strong and resilient runners. However, we need to have the foundational components there first before we start adding in these little icing on the cake moments. Let me show you an example of some power moves that I like to use with my clients.
Here's a fun power exercise I like to do with my clients because you guys know I love single leg squats so much. This one kind of forces us to get more explosive off that single leg, which is awesome for climbing. But low key, this is actually one of my favorite power exercises. I love this quick reversal hop. So the main focus is to hop off one foot and come back as quickly as you can onto the other and really stick the landing. I see that with a lot of people. Maybe they've trained a little bit of plyometrics and kind of this power stuff, but the ability to like quickly move and quickly absorb is so huge for running. And this is one of the end stage exercises I'll use for a lot of my clients.
Big takeaways from this video. I want you guys to play detective in your life and think, where am I lacking in my training week? Am I not having enough mobility work? And I'm stiff and I need to do more mobility stuff? Or am I a person who's super mobile and I need to do more stability and control stuff? Am I stuck at the top of the pyramid and I'm doing a bunch of power stuff, but I'm not really focusing on my endurance and making sure that I have good form as I'm going through these things? If you don't know, which it's actually totally fine if you don't know, because how are you to know? It's a great idea to check in with a local physical therapist, get a great assessment on kind of where you're lacking. If you know where you're lacking and you need some guidance on mobility, stability, control, endurance, strength, and power drills, come and check out the Empowered Runners Club. I have programming for all of these things. You'll get your first 2 weeks free. You get access to me in our membership chat. So as you guys are going through and you're like, Sarah, should I use mobility? Should I use stability? Should I use these power exercises? Or you have questions on setup or anything like that, you can get access to me in our club. I would love to see you there. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I will get back to you as soon as possible.